in issues there.
Yep.
Hello, welcome. Oh, I've got some people already. Perfect. Well, welcome. We've got our 3 speakers here today, Chris, David, and Lewis. So Lewis is at the top, and then Chris, and then David at the bottom. We'll just give everyone a couple of minutes to get in here, and then we'll just start. But in the meantime, we have all emailed you if you've registered for this event in Teams. So please check your spam filters or junk mail folders to get that, because we're probably emailing you for the first time. And we did ask you for some questions that you wanted to answer today, but again, you've got multiple opportunities. You can put them in the Q&A right at the top here in the Q&A little icon. If you press that and put your question there, we'll get to it at the end. Otherwise, feel free to email Casey. Her email is right there, kcr@centrian.com.au. If it's something a bit more confidential or risque that you want answered, please put it in there, and then we'll get to it as well at the end. Otherwise, if we are talking and you have a really good idea and you want those answered by one of our 3 experts, put it anywhere, and at the end we will answer it as well. So thanks for coming. We'll give another minute or 2. Got quite a few people in here, and then we'll get started. So let's, today we've got Chris Porter from Sentrian, David Lisitsa from New Law, and Lewis Liu from Clio. And let's get started. So just quickly, who is Sentrian? We're one of Australia's best IT MSPs that is leaning heavily into AI, and we partner pretty closely with Clio and work with David as well. So we were founded a while ago, but our AI services are proving very popular right now, and we service a lot of law firms and very high risk sort of finance and accounting firms as well. So firms that can't compromise on quality and cybersecurity and things like that. So that's us, and then I'll let you introduce you by yourself, Clio. Lewis, just a quick rundown, who is Clio, just in case anyone isn't familiar.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. My name is Lewis. So Clio is, think of it as a cloud-based legal tech. We serve about 400,000 legal professionals across 130 countries right now. As we evolve together with the technologies, we've obviously adapted more AI into the day-to-day tools of Clio to help future-proof law firms that uses Clio. That's a little bit about Clio from my end. Over to you, David.
That's perfect. David?
Wonderful. Hi, I'm David. I'm one of the directors at New Law, and we're a system-agnostic advisory consultancy that assists law firms, everything from sole traders to larger firms, with system selection, implementation, migration, integration, custom build-outs. We're an end-to-end provider, but primarily we're an advisor in terms of what their future tech stack should look like for a law firm.
Perfect. Okay, and that's why all of us are speaking today. So over to you, Lewis. What does a modern practice management system look like? Because there's a lot of people on legacy systems that are maybe looking to switch. So in your view, what are the modern ones looking like?
I think there's been a lot of discussion on that, like what should a PMS look like in this day and age, right? So a lot of them, you would expect main things like matter management, timekeeping, and billing to still be part of it. But what differentiates a modern practice management system is the ability to future-proof a law firm. So that includes how well it integrates AI into its tools. How well does it connect and synergize with other tools in the law firm's tech stack as well? So a good practice management system should serve as what you call an operational backbone to the firm, right? Its ability to connect to different parts of your tech stack will, at the end of the day, help the firm operate a lot more smoothly compared to one that is a little bit more rigid, doesn't really have an opening API, and doesn't really work well with others, so to speak. So that, to me, is what a modern practice management system should look like.
Perfect. Okay, no, I think that's well answered. Anything from both of you that you want to add to that? Just David.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So a modern practice management system is one that primarily connects to a broader tech stack that firms are looking for. CRM, external reporting, pricing automation, but it's the core of the system. While traditional practice management systems were a monolith, they were an all-in-one. So there's the modern practice management system at its core is one that connect to anything else that the firm might want to use. And obviously with being a web-based system, which is where most of the products are looking like now, that's probably what we're looking at when we're talking about a modern practice management system.
Okay, great. Let's move along then. Why now? I mean, Lewis, you kind of hit the nail on the head here, but obviously the AI wave is affecting us all, even at Sentrian itself as we roll out more AI services. So obviously that's one big transition. But yeah, why are customers looking at the tech stack now and looking to change?
I mean, I can sense that. So the firms want to do more. They need to be more efficient. It's a more competitive environment. So to be able to do more, you need to integrate, comprehensive marketing like you do in other areas. You need to have a bit of a workflow when it comes to document production, task allocation. Essentially, especially in very specialized areas like conveyancing, you almost can't do them manually anymore and be competitive. So this is why there's a really big move towards, well, which parts can we automate? Which parts can we make simpler? And to some degree, and being a arguably younger solicitor as well, we're not as good technically as the traditional lawyers were. We have more reliance on tools. So I guess for staff retention it's also become a critical component because I've seen staff walk into a law firm with a legacy tool and they were like, and they grew up on an iPhone. They're just like, I don't understand how this works. I don't know how to do a will from scratch. I have no idea. So the expectations are higher, and this is kind of debatable, but the move towards at least not value-based pricing necessarily, because I think that's been a little bit oversold, but the move towards kind of expected fees has definitely opened up the market for, well, if we can do it more efficiently, we can make more of a profit, essentially.
Yeah.
But lawyers want to approach their client. So one more thing I'll just mention is especially post-COVID, firms are they grow quicker. They sometimes look at, listen, I can break into this area. I can do family law in a different state now that people are happy to join to Zoom. So the growth is sometimes a little bit concerning. You'll go from a 5-user firm to a 40-user firm in a period of a year, and they need to be able to scale. They need to be able to systematize because otherwise the risks are very high.
Actually,
I think also one
really
thing I'll add in on that, I think some people with older legacy system would argue the point that they have a workflow, they have a way of processing, and the change management component, it's just new modern technology brings other opportunities, and the ecosystem around that. It's not just about processing the tasks in the matter. It's even having integration is how do I get that customer online to begin with, kind of thing, and having those sort of efficiencies in more modern systems.
I love it. Okay, well, that brings us to the status quo. So obviously, this is pretty well known in software, is that the biggest purchase decision is actually sticking with the incumbent software that you are running with, because sometimes it's viewed as too hard to change. But Chris, you made some really good points about some hidden costs that maybe people aren't aware of that they're currently absorbing by sticking with the status quo. So what are they, in your opinion?
Yeah, just sort of the things that people sort of forget that they've got, but certainly, shifting towards more cloud-based systems versus your hardware heavy on-premise systems. Some of the older legacy systems need a reasonably large server to run. There's then all of the licensing of database licenses, all of the Microsoft components, and then keeping those systems patched and up to date and all of those sorts of things. So from a Sentrian standpoint, we're seeing more and more move from on-premise equipment into the cloud, and having that sort of advantage of being able to sort of operate anywhere without the need to have those pieces of equipment in your office. So certainly, reducing the expense of that side of things. Also with the older systems, keeping them up to date. Cybersecurity is a massive thing these days. And as we move into AI related activities, your data governance and those sorts of things. So, being able to make sure that your systems are all up to date, patched, all of those sorts of things, reducing the need to sort of be doing that and managing that in-house yourself or having somebody manage it for you. And certainly, the manual, the support, I should say, for those things. There's so many systems out there now that, new patches are really, it's a keep the lights on sort of approach, versus, more modern systems that are bringing out new features, new functionality, and sort of driving forward versus the older systems that really are just, going nowhere in a lot of respects.
Actually, that's a good point. That's something we talked about earlier, wasn't it? It's like some of these older legacy systems, which are pretty solid, they're sort of intentionally being deprecated or just like coasting along and trying to milk as much as they can out of the remaining customers as they decline in the future. But that reduces investment into the security patches, so they can end up being sometimes more of a security flaw than the modern cloud-based systems. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and there's a lot of angles to that, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But certainly, some of there's a number of systems out there that people have been using those systems for a long time, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and it's when things like how does AI help my business, or making sure you're covered with the more modern things like your cybersecurity risk, your data governance, and those sorts of things. It can be, to not be exposed and to manage all of this yourself, it can be a very costly exercise.
Great. Okay. Well, moving on, coming to switching, often you hear we can't switch, it's impossible. What would you say to that, Chris?
Yeah, look, and I'll bring David into this because he'll hear this quite a bit, and probably Lewis as well. But yeah, look, I think the real question, it comes back to that. Some of the legacy systems people have been using the system for 10 or 20 years, and it's a big change management component. But and it's also David mentioned it before, the one system that did everything versus switching to potentially multiple systems. So there's a few areas that what can you start to replace? What can you start to look at? And if you're looking at other tools and other systems, whether it be CRMs to help drive your business, your VoIP phone systems, and those sorts of things, making sure that you're looking at things that are going to easily integrate into your new practice management systems. That's certainly critical, and certainly sort of weighing up that notion of one system did everything versus having that sort of best of breed. But certainly David and Lewis could probably make some more comment on that.
Yeah, so you can switch. I guess one of the takeaways is, like you do with a contract, you just need to do the due diligence. So you need to take the time, whether it's internally yourself or with external support, and to break down. There's the data migration aspect, and it's a really good opportunity to clean the data up because it's used in so many systems. It could be used for marketing, etc. So the data migration is fairly complex, but it can be done. It just needs to be done comprehensively. The other thing is to within your current system, let's say it's a legacy system, is to identify not so much the systems that you're buying, but the functions that you're using. So obviously every practice management system has trust accounting. Every management system has document management, but some larger firms might use a dedicated DMS. So going feature by feature and saying, okay, tasks, approvals for billing, approvals for disbursement payments, intake forms, workflows for running the matter, reporting. These are all function sets. And when we're looking at changing tools, let's say we end up with 3 tools, Clio and NetDocs and something else, or HubSpot, whatever it is. Which parts are covered well, which parts are not, and I guess which parts are a priority. Is CRM a priority or is it a nice to have? What are your non-negotiables? So if you work for insurance companies and you need leads billing, that's a non-negotiable. It either has it or it doesn't. So these are the things that I guess you'd really want to consider, note down, do due diligence on, and unfortunately, it's hard to gauge it straight away. The other thing I will notice is just to get your firm kind of used to change management. Once you go on a due diligence journey, you start identifying very quick wins, essentially sometimes point solutions that you can start showing value. So you might have, I won't notice name specific products, but there's products that sync styles across Word documents. So if you do commercial work, you may want to be able to apply a style across multiple documents. Or if you've sent a contract, exchanged it, it's a small bit, but for some firms it's critical. It may be, we want to be able to record our file notes or record our phone calls and have the AI summary placed as a file note because we spend so much time talking with a client on the phone. We may want to look at the CRM first. So yes, often the PMS is the heart of your change, but there's a lot of I guess quick wins that you can get started with straight away. And sometimes it may be just collating all your precedents, making sure they're systematized even before even before you start, or even essentially at the start of the journey. But the way to think about it is that we've got a 12 months journey that we need to take. What's phase one? What's most critical? What are all the key stakeholders want? Like, if management comes in and says, look, we want to do more marketing. We want to be able to do company social media posts. Okay, we do that first. But if we get a CRM system, will it integrate with our PMS system? Will it integrate with our VoIP system? So you almost look at different products, but you have to see, well, what does the 12-month journey look like? Will it all fit together like I envisaged it? That's, I guess, the timeline.
Nice. And you do mention data here. I know it can be a drier subject for people, but I mean, to really utilize AI, it all relies on the quality of the data. So, and not as just a compliance thing, but the accuracy of that data, which is generally in lots of different places, is really important. So, run us through. You've done a couple of these, David, obviously in your current work. What would you recommend people do here?
Well, I guess the first thing is whatever you're doing, ultimately, any switch that you're doing, you need a data analysis with the view of potentially moving that data into a set of systems. So simple things like contact deduplication, understanding which contact information is critical. Like, if we deal with lots of developers, we need to be able to capture that structure. So the first thing is, how do we restructure this substantial? How do we restructure it in a way that would fit into a modern system? So a lot of legacy systems have different core data structures than modern systems. So they'll have joined parties, trusts, lots of different complicated ways of showing relationships between entities. With most modern systems, it's a little bit simpler. It's like a Salesforce approach where it's individual or everything else is a company. So, and then most of the relationships are either connected at a contact level, just with a label, or they are related at a matter level. So I guess doing the deduplication first is going to be critical, and then knowing what you're going to be using that data for is critical. But the biggest takeaway is whatever system you move into, whether it's CRM, PMS, DMS, is you want to trial it and see it with your data. So you want to, at some point in the process, load all your data into a system and visualize it, because until you see it, just because the data has been deduplicated and cleaned up, it doesn't mean it's usable to the staff. It's usable in that system that you're looking at. So yeah, data migration, and then ultimately, if we have the data consolidated, AI is a great opportunity to help find the value in it. So, the AI can only search on the data that you capture. So from a procedures, it's really important to change some of the policies on how we actually do things. If we track referrers, let's say, this particular financial advisor is referring matters. If we tag it, later on, it'll be very easy to surface that data. We don't have, even with AI or a report, to say, this is the person that we need to, take out for,
More
send them a
lunches.
Christmas present.
Yep.
Exactly right. So being able to query, and as the technology is growing, that core data source, as long as it's captured, and AI can help with that as well, it can be queried. It can be leveraged. And realistically, the business's data right now, and it historically was buried under complex reports, but the new currency that a law firm has is the 30 years of relationships that they have, the 30 years of data, the 30 years of precedence. So yes, in terms of, and I'm just looking through the notes, in terms of what can and can't be migrated, there's obviously limitations sometimes around that.
I think
The
that's
biggest one is,
a big one, David, just to make sure
Yep.
that what can and can't be migrated. I think people sort of think that, this is where, and they're so used to where data was in their old system. Where's it going to be when you move forward, and what is there and what isn't going to be there? So that's, I've heard certainly horror stories about, migrating systems years gone by, and everything ends up in the notes and it's unusable, or different things like that. So it's really wanting to make sure that those sorts of things are done. And the one thing, before we sort of move on, I think the one thing there, I think, is making sure that the lawyers are checking samples of the data, because they're the best ones that will be able to tell, is all the data there or not. I was talking to a law firm about 2 months ago, and had a data migration, and unfortunately they thought a lot of stuff was there, but when they went live and they started working forward, then the lawyers found out that file notes were missing, or documents were missing, or things that their things weren't in the right spot. It's too late. It's too late. Then you need to get that up front. So yeah.
they weren't one of our clients, because they would know
No.
what's missing.
Not one of your clients, David. No.
So
definitely
a bit of like user testing in that phased approach, I think, is the key takeaway here, right? Like Q&A process
Absolutely.
and user testing process. Yeah. So I think that brings us to, like, we've kind of mentioned data a bit here, but there's some security and compliance considerations as well. Run us through what those are.
Yeah. So there's that's becoming that source of truth and what have you. Yeah, cleaning up your data. The structure of where data sits will change, I think, when you move from legacy systems into new systems. And also, there's probably also, not necessarily for this slide here, but there's also that, what about some keeping the older legacy systems online for a little bit of time, so we can check back if we need to, or those sorts of things. So that's probably a conversation for along the way as well. But certainly when you're choosing a PMS, really understanding where your data is going to move to, the different systems, the different reliance on APIs and integrations with other systems is really key. It's something you haven't probably had to consider in the past. Security is a massive one. So there's a lot of acronyms, SOC 2 compliance, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of things in here where there's such a focus on cloud-based technology. Where is your data? Is it sitting in Australia? Is data leaving Australia and heading overseas for certain things? Being able to be well aware of all of those sort of compliance requirements around security is huge, and certainly with AI, getting access to data and what type of AI you're using, that's a massive consideration, I think, for people these days.
Yep.
And then that just really, that ecosystem that you're choosing, the integrations is the key. I think it's not, in this day and age, the PMSs will do a lot of work, but there'll still be integrations with other tools, and how that works. And I think, Clio is a great example of that. It's, not as difficult these days to plug in other systems versus going back 10 or 20 years ago. You had to get a team of developers to try and create an integration that every time you did an upgrade, something broke, those sorts of things. So that's a big thing. And yeah, I think that, look, again, the size of the firm, I think you need to be very mindful of that as well. There are a lot of systems that that can be sort of deployed in different ways, and really sort of understanding that of working with tools that are common sort of in your workspace from a size of firm, I think is certainly an important consideration in that respect. Lewis, I don't know whether you've got any comment on that as well.
So on the topic about firm size and how it matters, I think it's important for anyone who is considering a PMS change to really understand what your next PMS should be able to do for you. And if there are any growth plans in place, obviously, if let's say you start off being a solo practitioner, but in 12 months' time, you're looking to build out a team for up to 20 users, your next practice management system should accommodate for the 20 users rather than sticking to what's good and suitable now. Because as everyone can imagine, changing a practice management system, first of all, it's not easy. It's very time consuming, but it has to be done. And if done correctly, you'd only do it once, and it future-proofs you for however growth plans you want to go through. So it's important. An important aspect is to always remember, is the next practice management system that you're looking to build on, is it going to accommodate to my growth plans of my firm? So I think that's a very important point there.
Yeah, well said. And that brings us to some of the features that Clio is looking at that maybe people aren't aware of and where the product is going. Can you give us a quick wrap up on those things?
Sure. So first, we'll touch on the single sign-on. I think that's one of the tools that's, as David correctly mentioned, with a modern practice management system, what you should expect is the ability to integrate with different platforms out there. And with that, there is an increasing likelihood of a user to have multiple passwords without single sign-on, right? They'll need to have multiple passwords for different platforms. If you're like me and you can't be bothered to have a complicated password for each, you might make a very simple password for each of your logins. And that's a risk in itself, right? With single sign-on, it helps alleviate some of that risk. You have a single password, which is could be a much more complex. You log it at the start of the day, and throughout the day, any sort of platform that you jump in, you won't be prompted for any password. I'm actually keen to get both David and John to jump in here on the single sign-on. Do you see a particular importance in the discussions that you've had on this aspect?
Yeah, so from a Sentrian side of things, I think that's a huge thing these days. Multi-factor authentication, password management in general. Gone are the days where you can put your password on a post-it note and stick it on your monitor. One password for everything. You just can't do that stuff anymore. It's it's crucial, and being the single sign-on, and certainly with the MFA side of things, is for your business systems, practice management systems that are holding so much data. It is absolutely crucial. Yeah, David, your thoughts?
Yeah, so for lawyers, because you're looking at the cybersecurity. For lawyers, SSO is critical because from a usability perspective, the worst thing that can happen is I get in the morning and I have to log into the PMS, the DMS, the CRM, every tool I have in the system with passwords and two-factor to my phone. It is an absolute nightmare, even to the point that sometimes firms, this is in the public domain, especially management, would actually force IT to reduce security just so they can get through the process, and that causes its own problems. So I think SSO, one way to view it, it keeps everything simple. So it gives the legacy system experience, which is I open my computer and I'm working with the systems for modern web-based systems. So anyone over 5 users or 1 user in fact, anyone would want SSO. It also reduces the risks of your IT can centrally manage user access. So instead of having to cut the user, let's say somebody leaves, instead of having to go through 5 different systems and remove them manually with their own process, you just remove the access to the SSO and that's it, it's done. And long term, this is the only way that any mid-tier firm can work.
Yeah, that's great. Really good points there. I think the usability and the security improvements are very valid and a very good selling point. What about some of the AI systems and features that you have been rolling out? Maybe some people aren't aware of these features existing. What are you seeing that's landing really well in the market right now, Lewis?
Yeah, so one of the topics that everyone is talking about is how AI is going to help improve, a legal professional's life, and that's a big part of the development that's running in Clio. One of the things that we did roll out is Clio Work. Now, to those who may not be aware, what it does is putting Clio aside, what an AI tool essentially should do for a legal professional is to streamline manual tasks. Some people confuse AI as a way to replace a legal practitioner, or a paralegal. That's not the objective. The objective really is to move the starting point for any manual or tedious daily task that you have to do by 30 or 40, in some cases 60 to 70%. What you could potentially, what you would usually take, let's say, hours to analyze the document, build an argument, or do research, you with AI, if done correctly, it could only take you about a couple of minutes. So think about the time that's being saved here from an hour's worth of work on a daily basis, streamlined into being completed into a matter of minutes. That's a very big, selling point in terms of incorporating AI into your practice. Now, I know some people or some legal professionals might be a bit hesitant because it's still relatively new. I guess the topic of AI. What I have seen is with the adoption of AI, it may not necessarily just be a direction from the management that one day the directors or the principals just decide, let's incorporate AI because everyone's doing it. What I have heard is that they are forced to change because a lot of their clients are asking them, number one, are you using AI? Because in their head, if you are, there's a high likelihood that you'll be able to provide the work back to me at a shorter amount of time, right? And if you're not using
So hang on,
AI,
it's not, so AI is not viewed as a negative by clients.
not to so when you say clients with the lawyers, you mean no.
Yeah.
To them, there are certain things that you would have to declare. Like for insurance companies, for example, insurance lawyers, you will have to tell the client that, hey, you're going to use AI for such and such. It has to be signed off. It's just part of the requirement for them to understand using AI. But for other parts of the law, like family law, for example, if you're billing on an hourly basis, as a client, I want to know that if you can reduce the hours that you're going to bill to me, right, by using AI. So as opposed to me going to another firm down the road who can give me the same work in, an hour or two, you're going to charge me 6 hours. Realistically, who are they supposed to go with, right? So that's a key consideration many people have not, I guess, taken abroad when they try to evaluate AI into their practice.
Oh, yeah, that's some really, really good points. Perfect. Okay, well, we have all come together just to sort of wrap things up before we go to Q&A. We've all sort of come together to give you 4 points of guidance from years and years and years of experience around this area. So I'll let you choose which one you want to take. But the first is due diligence. Who can talk about that, the importance of that?
David. And I've touched on it already, so I'll keep it short. But
yes,
essentially and this is a bit of a tough one for to be clear, is doing the due diligence upfront is essentially the more time and effort and potentially money you spent ahead of actually committing to a technology stack and planning for a technology stack, the more effective it'll be and the less it'll cost you in terms of resources and headache. So when you're looking at building out the tech stack, you need either internally or someone externally like us to handhold you through working through the various CRM systems, PMS systems, DMS systems, AI systems, and to extract from your team the requirements. And the requirements don't just come from the practicing partner or the GM. The legal assistants have very different requirements to the practice manager. Each legal team has wildly different requirements. And ultimately, you end up with a set of trade-offs. And those trade-offs could be, well, finance is going to have a worse time, but the lawyers will have a better time. And usually that's a fair trade-off because, well, there's more lawyers. but it could also be, a particular team will have, potentially less improvements, but another team will find it very useful. So if you have a highly customizable system and you have some bespoke practice areas, then, well, like with Clio, you can create a whole bunch of fields for those bespoke practice areas. And with other system, you might not be able to. But it's balancing those set of trade-offs, and essentially at some point presenting these are your two stack options. So these particular tools, especially point solutions, will work with whatever stack you choose. So they're a fixed point. These two, we have a set of trade-offs. So you need to decide what the trade-offs you're willing to live with. That's the due diligence that needs to be done so you can make essentially an informed decision, because right now with kind of everything's AI. And even with AI, the due diligence needs to be done because there's multiple levels of AI. We're going to enable Copilot in your Outlook so you can search your emails quickly. That's an easy solution. Like you can add that right now with very little risk. Or we're going to have a PMS with embedded AI.
Depends on the version of Copilot, David.
Exactly.
Gets complicated.
Exactly right. So then ultimately the idea of AI is you want it to be as close to your data as possible, especially for lawyers. If it takes 35, like nobody's practically going to download, a personal injury file with, thousands and thousands of documents and load them into ChatGPT and have it process. It's just not a viable solution. So there's almost, you want it as close to your system as possible. And then there are different levels of AI. Everything looks ChatGPT or Gemini, you don't really know if it's going to work, whatever system you're using, until you run it against a real file that you as a lawyer know. So there's almost two levels of AI on top of what you would call foundational models like Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, which are great for testing, experimenting, understanding what it does. There is what you would call the standard AI, which in your PMS, which like Clio Manage, for example, that can help draft, can do some general searches in the system. And there's generally what you would call high level AI. And this is something that can, and this is like, Clio Work or Harvey, Legora, or, some of these, more, or even bespoke build outs of AI, which can process huge document sets and do deep analysis and deep research. And I'm not sure if everyone's quite ready for that yet. Everyone's kind of jumping into it, but it's tough. It's tough to get it right. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, I think from a due diligence side of things, I think key takeaways for me is for a lot of people, changing systems or looking for a new system is not something they do every day. It's not the thing that you, hopefully you don't do it every day. But I would definitely recommend to start with reaching out to your managed service provider. Hopefully your MSP has got a strong presence in legal tech and understands the technology behind things. From the Sentrian side of things, our support desk guys, they're taking calls from clients when things aren't going well, etc. So we get a feel for what works well and what doesn't work well. On top of that, and being able to talk to your MSP is great. On top of that, definitely start to engage people like David who can consult you on the process, and they can shortcut so much of the trial and error, and so many questions can be answered, as opposed to I'm not saying you shouldn't do your own work, but it's certainly, having the right people on board in that due diligence area can really help you make better decisions and more informed decisions in that respect. Moving on to the next topic, I know John's going to get me in time for trouble, in trouble for time, but the implementation and data migration, I think we've talked about that quite a bit in this process. There's some absolute horror stories for people that don't pay enough attention to this through the process, and kind of just I'll ask somebody to do it and I'll leave it to them to do it. From my side of things, the project management side of things, definitely you can get people to help drive the project along, but at the end of the day, you need to be checking every step of the way. You need to be making sure that, when you go live, that the data is where you think it is, and the data is all there that you think it's going to be there. All of those sorts of things in place. So, and again, people with years of experience in doing this are going to do a much better job than trying to go at it alone in that sense.
Yeah, I guess I can take on the go live cutover side of things. So it's very similar to what Chris mentioned with regards to how it's like a project to manage. Before anything that essentially gets cut over to go live, you need to understand what's the onboarding process going to be like. Is everyone in the team ready, or majority of the main users, are they ready for the change? What's going to happen on the day of the change, and when it's going to happen as well? Strategically, wouldn't want a change of that level to happen at your busiest time of the year. That may not be the best time. So it's a lot about planning and project management. And that's something that you will have to discuss either with your IT or MSP provider or a consultant, just to make sure on that day there really are no surprises to anyone in the team when it comes to that day.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, very nice. And then obviously, after the switch, there's what I'm getting the current theme out of here is like do DD up front, get your plans, make the switch in a transition sort of phased approach, and then continue the journey after the switch over has been made, like in terms of training and just quality assurance and that kind of thing. So obviously there's and then also, Chris, you made this good mention of sometimes running your legacy system or archive files. I think we had a discussion the other day about
Yeah. People sometimes, there's different approaches. Do I run parallel? Do I run two systems at the one time? Personally, I think that's not a great idea for most cases. I think you need to make the switch, have the go live, and then commit going forward. But in saying that, what do you do with your legacy system? Definitely there's some thought, and again, involve your MSP around what that looks like. Can you scale your server back? Can you move that legacy system into a smaller solution that can basically be just available for a few key people, not the whole firm. You shouldn't be going live with the system and having all of your firm still working in the legacy system and the new system. I think it's a recipe for disaster. But having the comfort of being able to look back at the legacy system if you do have trouble and you need to find something unexpected, having a couple of key people in the organization with that ability is a good thing. But and then how long do you keep that legacy system for, and how does that operate? Again, involve your MSP through that process. But it's more of a backup for edge cases where you might need to find something in that respect. Lewis, David, I'll ask for comment.
So absolutely right, Chris. So just assume that having so there's any sort of legacy system that whether it's Affinity, Infinity, Practice Evolve, OP, or at least the legacy ones, you want it to be frozen in time as a read-only system, because you don't just want to run it on a server. It might update, it might not, it might break. You're never going to be able to migrate, let's say, an auditable log for your trust transactions. It's just not possible. By virtue of it being an audit log, it just can't be done. So usually most good MSPs, and Sentrian is definitely one of them, can set up a dedicated virtual machine and essentially freeze it in time that you can access it. And that mitigates an enormous amount of risk when moving to a new system, because for better or worse, if you need to, you can always go back into it. It's a little bit harder with moving from modern system to modern system, but even then, getting a data download and then storing it somewhere is generally a good idea as well.
Actually, that's one thing we didn't talk about in that data migration, David, is really identifying, are we just migrating open matters? Are we migrating everything for the last 7 years? What if a law firm's been operational for 15 or 20 years? Are we migrating files from way back? So what happens to those sorts of things? And that's potentially where some of these legacy systems need to be frozen in time for some of that aspects.
Yeah, and speaking of that, what is the state of the current market? Clio has just released a report, Lewis, on that, which we've put the URL down there, or go to the Clio website. Tell us what were some of the findings out of that? Obviously, all three of you have read it, but any sort of highlights we can report on?
I think on a very high level, there's quite a few to go through. What I will suggest is the parts that will kick on is mostly about AI integration and how well AI is being adopted across those that are of your firm size. So we have seen different themes for smaller firms all the way to from solo pracs to mid-sized firms and how well they're adopting AI into their day-to-day, how open they are into adopting AI moving forward, and how many of them are actually actively pushing for more enhancements, either with Clio or with someone else. So that's one of the most interesting parts about the report that I've read so far. As you can imagine, majority of the conversation I've had is just asking me about what's Clio doing to future-proof my firm. And this goes back to my point. If they are going to make a move, if firms are going to make a move, they want to make a move with the impression that I'm not going to be doing this again when AI, not say takes over the world, but is part and parcel of what is required of a practice management system. How well positioned am I as a firm with my current provider to tackle that requirement? And that's one of the key things I think I can highlight about the report. Not sure if Chris and
I think
would agree on.
Yeah, look, I think that there's it's actually a good report to look at. I think David also has summarized. I've seen one of his posts on social media summarizing some of the information there, but a few things that stood out to me, and I think you guys can go and have a look at the report and find out for yourself. But the cost of extracting data out of your existing practice management system, so not the cost of migrating into your new system, but just to get data out of some systems is much more expensive than people might realize. But there's some figures in there for that. I was surprised to see in there that 51% of lawyers aren't fully confident that they actually own their own data, which is again a really worrying stat. So I think when you're talking about sort of moving into new systems, not that you really want to be talking about exiting those systems, but you do want to be making sure that you're not locked in for the next decade and those sorts of things. So definitely check that out. Definitely, I think there was a stat in there about 37% of firms are only comfortable. Only 37% are comfortable with their data governance, and really sort of in that state from an AI point of view, they're confident. So 60 odd percent aren't confident that they've got the right cybersecurity boundaries around things like AI and those sorts of things. So there's some really good reading in there, and I think it's a good thing that Clio's released that.
Okay, and you make a good point, Chris, around the data governance piece, because I know when we've been brought in for companies to do AI systems, often that is lacking as well. We need to do that first. So that's been proving pretty popular and quite essential before moving on.
Yeah, look, I think we're talking to a lot of people at the moment where, so from an MSP standpoint, obviously from Sentrian standpoint, MSPs traditionally were that sort of help desk, people that have helped organize your systems and kept them patched and operational and those sorts of things. We've certainly pivoted to increasing our service offering across the board, and some of our, obviously in the last 12, 24 months, very popular around cybersecurity and AI data governance. Copilot, all of those sorts of tools that people are looking at, and there's more stats around shadow AI and things that are in that if you're not giving staff the right tools, they'll go and find it themselves. And there's some really scary stuff going on in those areas. If you're you could be very exposed from that side of things. But so certainly from our side, if your MSP isn't sort of helping you with things like Copilot or data governance, by all means reach out to us and we can help you in those areas. But and also obviously put you in contact with David and the guys at Clio to help out with any of those sorts of things. More than happy to do that.
Sorry, gents, I'm going to move you along. Yeah, so please visit our website. There's a QR code there, centric.com.au. Newlaw.com is the URL, correct, David? Yeah, newlaw.com, and you can get onto David, and then obviously Clio.com as well. So we had a couple of questions. I'm just going to read these out, and whoever is best to answer them, that would be great if you can come forward and give it your best attack. First one is, after seeing the full transition timeline, what's the most realistic first step our firm should take to PMS within the next year?
Um,
So what's the first step?
I mean,
What's
first
the
step.
what's the first step?
Uh,
So I'll
so
answer that, David. I would
go
say
ahead, go
get
ahead.
your MSP involved, and then get somebody like David involved. That
Yes.
would be
Okay.
my first step.
And sort of like project timeline, the whole thing, and brief all senior leadership and partners and decision makers, like where we're going to start and where we're going to go, and sort of sell that whole process before it
David,
happens.
can you talk about the timeline as far as like how far in advance? I think a year in advance is a certainly a realistic sort of timeline for a number of organizations.
Yeah, so the actual what you would call due diligence that you should do internally would be anywhere between 2 and 4 months at a minimum. During that process, you may identify certain products that can be switched on straight away, but you can essentially at the end of the due diligence, you can say we have a timeline, we have a budget for what the new software will cost. It compares well to the budget of the current software stack and tech stack. It's been pushed through to leadership for review and approval. We've done a set of trade-offs, and we now at a certain point we're essentially just executing the plan, and that probably happens over those last 6 months. There's also a vendor negotiation component for a variety of aspects, whether it's key functionality that needs to be added, whether it's pricing, whether it's support agreements, whatever else. And again, you need someone to act on your behalf in that context. But the first step is, you're completely right, Chris, is speak to your MSP. Either you have a person internally that you want to allocate the job to, but unless it's someone who's particularly experienced in legal tech, and they have a team to support them, you'll generally need some external resources. And we're not the only one. You've got, if you're in Queensland, Jackie White Consulting is great. There's a bunch of independent people that have spent a lot of time in legal that can provide that advice, and sometimes they specialize in different areas. But you want to get some advice initially. I mean, realistically, anyone who's been in the sector that has provided that advice, at least 20% of the value is just the initial conversation. Is just to sit down and have a conversation before you engage anyone, so they can paint a picture for you for which direction you're going. So
Actually,
speak to someone.
Sorry to cut you off there, David, because that is question number 2, if you don't mind. Number 2 is, what internal gaps should we access before engaging external support, if any? So is it to have that conversation internally?
So you need a project lead, and it needs to be a senior person, and they have to have the ability to engage with all the stakeholders in a robust way. So it can't just be someone we just brought on, and you want to be fairly certain that they're going to stay on through the project, because losing the point of contact during the project is a big problem. There's a huge knowledge transfer that happens, because part of the due diligence is also education. It's an education piece as much as anything else. So if losing that knowledge is highly detrimental to the project. So whoever you choose internally, whether it's one person or 2 people, preferably, because it's honestly a little bit more fun doing it with 2 people. It's a little bit less dry than going through hundreds of precedents for the firm and trying to collate them and into some sort of usable format by yourself. But ultimately, having a point person, no firm, even in mid-tier, except maybe one that I've experienced, genuinely has an internal project team that can handle it end to end. And even that particular firm, I can't say which one, but
I think
had a 5-person,
internally
so just let me just finish quickly. It had a
Yep.
5-person team internally, a project team for a 100-user firm, and still engaged external consultants. So there is definitely something to be said for getting some external advice. Just like, you wouldn't run your own legal matter and you wouldn't advise people to do their own legal matters without a lawyer. There's a certain level of industry knowledge and expertise that you want to leverage.
I think in those early stages, as well as making sure internally you're identifying the time that it's going to take internally, and don't underestimate that. I think some people try to continue their day-to-day job and implement a new system at the same time. That never ends well in my cases. Yeah.
Okay. And the third question is, before we wrap up, is how should a firm decide which model aligns best with our firm?
So can you just repeat the question again?
It says, how should a firm decide which model aligns best with our firm? So model, in this case, transition model, or are we talking AI model? Let's not
I think I can interpret that question. So there's a couple of models for transitions. AI is a whole different conversation. Is what you would call highly staged, or a big switch. So we're going live with everything that day. That will depend on the integrations between the systems. So if you're getting, I don't know, NetDocs or iManage and Clio at the same time, you probably want those to go at the same time. The CRM could happen earlier. So if you're talking about big switch or a staged approach, anything that you can stage is generally good. But that's from a switch model. That's the analysis that you would want to make, because honestly, not everyone loves change management as much as I do. Most people just want to do their job. So that's why you need that one or two people internally that handle all the coordination internally with the firm and only pull people in from their day job where they need it. So from a model perspective, ultimately there is no best model. It just depends on what technology you're choosing and what your risk profile is, as well as what the efficiency of going live with certain products at the same time versus breaking them up.
Okay.
I've had questions in the past around, should I just move one department to begin with to test it out? So we'll get the family law guys to move, but the commercial guys or whatever, we'll leave them on the legacy system. I think typically speaking, there are things like the trust accounting and some other internal sort of transactions that make that more difficult. But Lewis, David, have you got any comments on that sort of approach that people sometimes think about?
So both are viable, except there's obviously a substantive increase in costs. If you wanted to say genuine due diligence, you could have a pilot project. You wouldn't do a pilot project in a 10-user firm. If you're, 60, 70, 80, 100, that may be a viable approach. Just understand that it is going to be a valuable but an expensive exercise. So you could just, but I think it's necessary. You could do a data migration without ever seeing a trial data migration. Just cross your fingers and hope day one everything's there. But that's not recommended. And in fact, most people that do it wouldn't do it if that's what you wanted. So there is definitely, maybe not a formal pilot, like in a substantial sense, but it is at least getting access to the system, running one or two matters through it, even in a mock status is already a good approach. Like, just to see it, just to feel it. Well, what is it? How do I file an email? How do I, run a bill? Demos can be, they can blur into each other. You don't even remember which, you saw 10 different providers and you don't remember which feature ties into which one. You get the system, you spend a bit of money, spend a bit of time setting it up for one or two key people in the litigation team or the property team and have them run the matter through it, make sure their KPIs aren't affected in terms of billings, give them some actual paid time to do it. And then you'll get some good feedback.
Perfect. Okay, I think that's some really good advice. Thank you, gentlemen, for running us through all that. I think anyone who is looking to change practice management systems, you probably covered most of their questions pretty comprehensively. So just moving along now, thanks for all your questions, everyone who attended. That was really good. And if you enjoyed the session, a bit of feedback for us. This is a QR code to our Google reviews page. So if you enjoyed this session, please let us know. And that really sort of helps us out as well and gain some more exposure in the world. And we're always looking for feedback. So please do that if you can. And then, yeah, that's it. Feel free to reach out to David, Lewis, and Chris via their websites or even on LinkedIn. I think all three of you are somewhat.
If you haven't, yeah, I was going to say, if
LinkedIn.
you haven't got their details, by all means, reach out to us through Sentrian, and we're more than happy to pass you on and get you in touch with Lewis and David. Yeah.
Exactly. And you'll all receive an email. So please, again, just to quickly check your junk folders. Everyone who registered on Teams today for this session, check your junk folders just to make sure the email that we sent through from, I think it's care@Sentrian, has been received. So, and then we will send you some extra tidbits and highlights from today's session as well, because some people might want to watch this again. So check your inboxes going forward. And all of the three gentlemen today's details will be included in that as well. So, and without any further ado, let's move on, and please start your day and hope it's a good one before holidays.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
for
everyone.
attending.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.